So in the last video we talked about the relationship of the different accounts between the balance sheet and the profit and loss account. And as we understand it, within the profit and loss account or income statement, there are two accounts, that's income and expenditure. Within the balance sheet there are three accounts, that's the assets, liabilities and equity. So today in this video we're going to concentrate on the expenses. Now, have you ever said to yourself, if I just had a little bit more money, things would be okay? In fact, I'm going to tell you, you can have a little bit more money. You see, the easiest way to give yourself a pay rise is to cut your expenditure. There are things I believe that most of us spend money on that we don't need to be spending money on. So we'll talk about those individual things in a later video, so we'll really drill down into the different expenditures and how you can save some money on them, and not necessarily cutting your lifestyle, but you can actually increase and give yourself some more money. And with that money, you're then able to put it into different investments, and we'll talk about some of those different investments as well, and how you're actually then able to take that money and allow it to grow. But money, I have to tell you, does not solve money problems. Let me just say that one more time again. Money does not solve money problems. I'll give you some examples. The lottery winner suddenly gets a lot of money, and whether that's 1 million or whether that's 10 million, 100 million, whatever the amount is, we've read stories years later that lottery winner ends up broke. And part of the reason for that is that when you get an influx of money, suddenly your standards can change. So the house that you were quite okay living in before becomes inadequate, and you need the bigger house. You need the nicer car. You need the better vacations and holidays. So what tends to happen, although you get the extra money, your expenditures tend to rise with it. And it's the same for celebrities. Celebrities suddenly coming into lots of money, and they tend to then up their expenditure. They don't really know how to handle it. So what I want to talk about is the expenditure, because when you start, before you actually start generating extra income, and we'll talk about that in the next video, about generating extra income, you want to nail down your expenditures and make sure that they are under control, so that when you get the extra income, that can actually benefit you long term. Because this is what we're looking at. We're looking at long term. We want financial freedom. We want to not have money worries. We want to be financially secure. And the only way that we can do that is to keep our expenditure under control, increase our income, which then goes into buy assets and further our wealth. And I hesitate to say wealth, but it's really about making ourselves much, much more secure. The other big category, so we've got lottery winners, we've got celebrities that often lose money, and it's third generation inheritance. There's a philosophy that goes around saying that the first generation creates the money, the second generation compounds the money and expands upon it, and the third really have never had to do anything, never had to struggle, and they just spend the money and they end up losing the whole fortune. So that's why a lot of people, very, very wealthy people through time, have put money in trust to stop the third generation essentially pissing it away. They are the third one. So any expenditures, so we have here expenses. Within our income statement. Now, if you remember with the balance sheet in the last video, we had assets. And we talked about how any expenditure here reduced the asset here. So this is why that is so important. And that's why we're talking about expenditure before we're talking about the income. Sorry, I'm just having a quick look at my notes here. So by deciding what your expenditures are and driving those expenditures down, we're able to generate more net profit at the end, or net income, from our income. So it's important to bring those into control. So one of the other things that affects your expenditure over the longer term is debt. And the debt is a liability. And I have a definition for debt. Debt is spending tomorrow's money today. In other words, you're buying stuff in the future that you cannot afford today, and therefore you go into debt to do that. Now that's fine as long as your income doesn't drop. But the reality is, we live in an uncertain world and we never know when that might happen. So what we want to do is to build a financial fortress so as that we can really be very, very secure. And we do that in the first step by reducing our income. Now, a lot of people think, oh, that's going to be very hard to do. I want to give you an analogy. We think that we can't cut down on expenditures, and it's always much harder to come down on your expenditures than to move your expenditures up. If somebody is earning 100,000 a year, they're saying, I'm having difficulty getting by, and yet the person who's on 40,000 a year is getting by, but is probably still saying it's difficult to get by. And yet there's then somebody on 20,000 a year who's saying it's difficult to get by, and yet they're getting by. But taken as the most extreme, and nobody really wants to be in this position, imagine the person sleeping on the park bench, maybe with just a cardboard box to cover them. What's their expenditures? What is the basic things that they need? And so I want you to think of yourself as that person on the park bench as being the worst possible situation that you could be in, and build your expenditures from there and really think, what is it I really need? What are the basics that I would want, like food, shelter? And look at the basics and what's the lowest common denominator I could have for those items? So what size of house would I really appreciate? If that's where I came from, the park bench, I would appreciate a certain size of house. It wouldn't have to be very big. And yet a lot of people who are living in big houses think we can't do with that smaller house. And yet they desire financial freedom, and they're no nearer it than people who are very far away from, or seem to be far away from it, because they live in a low income environment. Actually, it has been proven that somebody starting this process from a low income is much more likely to achieve it than somebody who's starting from a large income. Now, that seems very, very strange, but it's because they have great difficulty in reducing this nut here. As I said, in future videos, we're going to look at reducing individual expenditures. So we're going to look at those in detail, how you might be able to do them. But I just want you to get the concept that we need to be reducing our expenditure here, and just have you buy into that process. So in the next video, we're going to talk about income, which seems a far more exciting prospect to talk about that. So in the meantime, please like and share this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already done so, and hit the notification bell. And I'd love your comments down below, and I will respond to anything that you put down there. So please add your comments and let's have a conversation. Thank you for watching, and please like and share with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to be notified of future videos.